They were cast out with nothing but 2 suitcases and a lifetime of betrayal. But the crumbling manor they stumbled into that stormy night held a secret that would make their children regret every cruel word. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The rain came down in sheets that October evening, the kind of cold, relentless rain that seeps into your bones and makes you question every choice that led you to this moment. Gareth Caldwell, 68 years old, with hands that had spent 4 decades working construction, stood beside his wife Miriam on the sidewalk outside what used to be their son's house. 2 battered suitcases sat at their feet, soaked through, zippers straining against everything they owned in the world. Miriam, 67, her grey hair plastered to her cheeks, stared at the closed door behind them. No one had even looked out the window. No goodbye, no apology. Just the click of a lock and the hum of a television returning to whatever show they'd interrupted. Gareth's jaw tightened as he picked up both suitcases, his shoulders hunching against the weight and the weather. "Come on, Miri," he said quietly, his voice rough with something between anger and heartbreak. "We're not standing here like beggars." Miriam wiped her eyes, though it was impossible to tell tears from rainwater. She nodded once, sharp and final, and turned away from the house where they'd lived for the past 7 months, the house they'd helped buy, the house that was supposed to be their home. 6 months earlier, their son Dalton and his wife Lennox had sat across from them at a diner, smiles bright and promises brighter. "We've been thinking," Dalton had said, reaching across to take his mother's hand. "Your place is getting too much for you to maintain. All those stairs, that old furnace. Why don't you sell it and move in with us? We've got the space, and honestly, we'd love the help with the kids." Gareth had been hesitant. He'd built half that house himself, replaced every pipe, rewired every outlet. But Miriam had been struggling with her knees, and the winters were getting harder. When Dalton suggested they could pool resources, invest the money from the house sale into his new business venture, it felt like family looking out for each other. They sold their home of 37 years for $214,000, gave $160,000 to Dalton for his restaurant investment, kept $54,000 for emergencies, for medical bills, for the future they thought they still had. The first 2 months living with Dalton and Lennox had been fine, tight but fine. Miriam helped with the grandchildren, 6-year-old twins who called her Grammy, and climbed into her lap with sticky fingers and endless questions. Gareth fixed things around the house, built the kids a treehouse, repaired the back deck. But by month 3, the tension started. Small comments from Lennox about the bathroom being occupied too long. Dalton mentioning how much the grocery bills had increased. The grandchildren, suddenly too busy for stories, shuttled off to their rooms when Gareth and Miriam came downstairs. By month 5, the restaurant had failed. Dalton never said it outright, but Miriam found the foreclosure notice in the recycling. $160,000 gone. Their entire life savings evaporated into grease traps and unpaid invoices. That's when the real coldness set in. Dalton stopped making eye contact. Lennox started leaving pamphlets for senior living facilities on the kitchen counter. Conversations happened in whispers that stopped when Gareth or Miriam entered the room. Then tonight, Dalton had finally said it. They were sitting at dinner, the kids already excused, when he cleared his throat. "Mum, Dad, we need to talk. This arrangement isn't working. Lennox and I, we need our space back. We think it's time you found your own place." Gareth had felt his chest tighten. "Son, we gave you everything we had." "And we're grateful," Lennox had cut in, her voice sharp and practiced. "But we never promised this would be permanent. You're adults. You'll figure it out." Miriam's voice had been small, almost childlike. "But where will we go?" Dalton wouldn't look at her. "There are programs, social services, maybe your sister in Tennessee." "My sister died 4 years ago," Miriam whispered. "You spoke at her funeral." Silence had filled the dining room like poison gas. Then Lennox had stood, started clearing plates, and said with chilling finality, "We'd appreciate it if you could be out by tonight. We have people coming tomorrow to look at turning your room into a home office." And that was it. 43 years of marriage, 2 children raised, a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice, reduced to 2 suitcases and a rainy sidewalk at 8:47 on a Thursday night. Now, Gareth loaded the suitcases into the trunk of their 1998 Honda Accord, the car they'd kept because it was paid off and ran decent. Miriam slid into the passenger seat without a word, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying. Maybe she was. Gareth started the engine. The gas gauge showed half a tank. He had $273 in his wallet, the remains of their emergency fund. Miriam had maybe another $100 in her purse. Their social security wouldn't come for another 2 weeks. "Where do we go?" Miriam asked, her voice barely audible over the rain hammering the roof. Gareth stared through the windshield at the suburban street, at the houses with their glowing windows and intact families. "I don't know, Miri. I honestly don't know." He drove. No destination, no plan, just the wipers beating rhythm to his racing thoughts. They couldn't afford a hotel, not for more than a night or 2, and then what? Shelters were full this time of year. Their other daughter, Callista, lived in Oregon with her lawyer husband and rarely called. They're old friends from the neighborhood. They'd lost touch when they moved in with Dalton. The city lights faded behind them as Gareth found himself on Route 47, heading northeast into countryside he barely recognized. The rain intensified, sheets of water obscuring the center line. Miriam had gone quiet, her head resting against the window, eyes closed. Gareth didn't know if she was sleeping or just couldn't bear to watch their life disappear in the rearview mirror. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. The gas gauge needle dropped toward a quarter tank. Gareth knew he should turn back, find a rest stop, something. But turning back felt like giving up, and he'd spent 68 years never giving up on anything. That's when the car started making the noise. A grinding metallic shriek from somewhere under the hood. The temperature gauge spiked into the red. Steam began pouring from under the hood in ghostly white plumes. "No!" Gareth muttered, pumping the gas pedal uselessly. "No, no, no!" The engine gave one final cough and died. The Accord rolled to a stop on the shoulder of a road that seemed to lead nowhere, surrounded by forest so thick it looked like a wall on either side. The headlights flickered once, twice, then went dark. Gareth sat in the sudden silence, broken only by rain and Miriam's quiet breathing. He pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. 68 years old, and this was how it ended. Broken down on a back road with his wife, their entire world reduced to whatever they could carry. "Gareth!" Miriam's voice was soft but urgent. "Gareth, look!" He lifted his head. Miriam was pointing through the windshield, through the rain-streaked glass, into the darkness beyond. At first, he saw nothing. Then lightning flashed, and for 3 seconds the world went white. In that brief illumination, Gareth saw it. Maybe 200 yards off the road, barely visible through the trees, a massive structure rose against the storming sky. Stone walls, peaked roofs, Gothic windows dark and hollow as empty eye sockets. "Is that a castle?" Miriam whispered. Another lightning strike confirmed it. Not quite a castle, but close. A manor house, huge and ancient, sitting alone in the wilderness like something from another century. "Maybe someone's home," Gareth said, though the place looked anything but inhabited. "Maybe they have a phone we can use." They sat for a moment, weighing options they didn't have. Then Miriam opened her door. The rain immediately soaked her, but she was already drenched anyway. Gareth grabbed their suitcases from the trunk, and together they stumbled toward the manor, using Miriam's phone flashlight to navigate the overgrown path. The forest had almost reclaimed the driveway. Weeds pushed through cracked pavement. Fallen branches blocked their way. But someone had been here once, had laid these stones, planted these now wild gardens, built this impossible structure in the middle of nowhere. Up close, the manor was even more imposing. 3 stories of weathered stone, windows tall enough to drive a truck through, a front door that belonged in a cathedral. Ivy crawled up the walls like it was slowly pulling the building back into the earth. Gareth climbed the front steps, each one bowed with age. He knocked on the massive door. The sound echoed hollow and dead. No lights came on, no footsteps approached. He tried the handle, locked solid. "Around back," Miriam said, already moving. Old places like this, servants' entrances are always weaker. Gareth followed his wife along the side of the manor, both of them soaked to the skin now, shivering despite the exertion. The back of the house was even more overgrown. A garden gone to seed sprawled into darkness. Stone benches tilted at drunken angles, and there, almost hidden behind a tangle of dead roses, a small door. Gareth tried it. To his shock, it opened. The hinges moved smoothly, almost silently, which was the first strange thing. Places abandoned for years didn't have smooth hinges, but Gareth was too tired and desperate to question good fortune. He pushed the door wide and stepped into darkness that smelled of old stone and something else, something like furniture polish and brass cleaner. Miriam followed him in, pulling the door closed against the storm. The sound of rain immediately muted to a distant whisper. Gareth found a light switch more from habit than hope and flipped it. Nothing happened. He pulled out his phone, used the flashlight. They were in a mudroom or servant's entrance, he guessed. Coats still hung on hooks, decades old but strangely intact. Boots lined up beneath them. A calendar on the wall showed August 1978. "Gareth," Miriam breathed, "this place has been closed up for over 40 years. They moved deeper into the manor, their flashlights cutting cones of white through absolute darkness. The servants' quarters gave way to a kitchen that belonged in a museum. A massive cast-iron stove dominated one wall. Copper pots hung from ceiling hooks, tarnished but present. A butcher block table sat in the center, its surface scarred with decades of knife marks. But here was the second strange thing. No dust. Or rather, very little dust. The kind of light coating you'd get from a few weeks of disuse, not 4 decades. Gareth ran his finger along the counter and came away with only a thin film of grey. "Someone's been here," he said quietly. "Recently?" Miriam asked. "Maybe not recently, but more recently than 1978. They continued exploring, moving from the kitchen into what must have been the servants' hall, then through a door into the main house proper. And here the manor revealed its true grandeur. The entrance hall soared 3 stories high, crowned by a domed skylight that lightning occasionally illuminated in brilliant flashes. A grand staircase swept upward in a curve of dark wood and iron railings. Portraits lined the walls, men and women in formal dress from centuries past, their painted eyes seeming to follow the intruders below. "Lord have mercy," Miriam whispered, her voice echoing in the vast space. Gareth moved to one of the portraits, shining his light on the brass plaque mounted to the frame. Lady Catherine Ashford, 1894 to 1964. He moved to the next one. Lord Edmund Ashford, 1867 to 1941. "Ashford," Miriam repeated. "I've heard that name. Wasn't there a minor royal family in England?" "Maybe a branch that came to America," Gareth said. "There were a few of those." They explored more carefully now, trying doors, peering into rooms. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, books still neatly arranged. A dining room with a table long enough to seat 20, place settings still laid out under white sheets. A music room with a grand piano covered but present. Sheet music still on the stand. Everything was preserved, maintained, frozen in time like the house itself was holding its breath. "We can't stay here," Miriam said, though her voice lacked conviction. "This is trespassing." "Where else can we go?" Gareth replied. "It's past midnight. The car's dead. We're miles from anywhere. Miri, I don't think we have a choice." She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw his own exhaustion and desperation mirrored in her eyes. They were too old for this, too tired, too hurt. "Just for tonight," she finally said. "Just until the rain stops and we can figure something out." They found a room on the second floor that might have been a guest bedroom. It was smaller than the grand chambers they'd passed, more manageable. A four-poster bed dominated the space, its mattress surprisingly intact under protective covering. A fireplace sat cold and dark against one wall. A wardrobe stood open, revealing men's clothes from another era. Gareth tested the bed. The springs groaned but held. "It'll do." Miriam sank onto the edge of the mattress like her strings had been cut. She was shivering violently now, her clothes plastered to her thin frame. Gareth rummaged through the wardrobe and found 2 old robes, moth-eaten but thick. He helped Miriam out of her wet clothes and into one of the robes, then changed himself. From his suitcase, he pulled out a can of soup and a camping stove he'd grabbed from the garage before they left. Small acts of rebellion against his son's cruelty. He heated the soup on the floor of the bedroom, the blue flame of the burner casting dancing shadows on the walls. They shared the soup in silence, passing the can back and forth, each spoonful warm but unable to touch the cold that had settled into their bones. It wasn't the weather. It was something deeper, the cold of betrayal, of being unwanted by the people who were supposed to love you most. 43 years, Miriam finally said, her voice cracking. "We've been married 43 years. We raised 2 children. We worked every day. We never asked for anything we didn't earn, and this is where we end up." Gareth set down the empty soup can. He took his wife's hands in his, feeling how small they'd become, how the wedding ring he'd placed there in 1981 now spun loose on her finger. "We've weathered worse," he said, though he couldn't actually think of when. "Have we?" Miriam asked. "Gareth, we have nothing. Our home is gone. Our savings are gone. Our children don't want us. We're squatting in an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere with less than $400 to our names." "We have each other," she laughed, a bitter sound he'd never heard from her before. "For how long? We're old. We're tired. How much longer do we even have?" Gareth pulled her close, felt her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back all night. He had no words of comfort because she was right. They were at the end. The finish line of a race they'd run with dignity, only to discover there was no prize, no crowd, no one who even remembered they'd been competing. They held each other as the storm raged outside and the old manor creaked around them. Eventually, exhausted beyond measure, they lay down on the bed, fully clothed in their borrowed robes, and sleep took them under like drowning. Gareth woke to grey morning light filtering through gaps in the curtains. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then it all came rushing back, and his chest tightened with fresh grief. Beside him, Miriam still slept, her breathing steady. Gareth eased out of bed, not wanting to wake her. She deserved whatever peace sleep could offer. He moved to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and dripping. From this height, he could see the extent of the property. The manor sat in the centre of what must have been a massive estate, acres of overgrown gardens and wild forest, a crumbling stone wall marking the perimeter maybe a quarter-mile away in each direction. A sound made him turn, not from the hallway, but from inside the walls, a low, rhythmic thumping, like something mechanical, like a heartbeat. Gareth pressed his ear to the wall. The sound was faint, but definitely there. Old pipes, maybe, or the house settling. Old buildings made strange noises. Except this noise had a pattern. 3 short thumps, pause, 2 long thumps, pause, repeat. "Miri," he called softly. "You awake?" Miriam stirred, blinked, then sat up with a start as she remembered where they were. "Did we really?" "Yeah," Gareth said. "We really did. Come here, listen to this." Miriam joined him at the wall. Gareth placed her hand against the plaster. After a moment, her eyes widened. "What is that?" "I don't know, but I want to find out." They dressed in their still damp clothes from the night before, grimacing at the clammy feel. Gareth grabbed his phone and they ventured out into the hallway. Morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. The manor was in remarkable condition. Yes, the wallpaper was peeling in places, and yes, dust had settled over everything, but there was no water damage, no obvious decay. The windows were intact, the floors were solid. They followed the sound, Gareth pressing his ear to walls at intervals, tracking the thumping like a hunter tracking prey. It led them down the grand staircase, through the entrance hall and into the eastern wing of the manor. Here the preservation was even more striking. A long corridor stretched ahead, doors on either side, and at the far end a double door that had been sealed shut. Not just locked, someone had installed drywall over the entire doorway, painted it to match the walls, even hung a tapestry over it. But the sound came from beyond those doors. Gareth examined the seal. "This is newer work, 90s maybe, early 2000s. Someone blocked this off deliberately." "Should we really—" Miriam started. "Miri, we're already trespassing. We're already at rock bottom. What's one more door?" He went back to their room and retrieved a pry bar from his suitcase, another item salvaged from his old workshop. When he returned, Miriam was running her hand along the concealed doorframe, her expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" Gareth asked. "That if someone went to this much trouble to hide a room, there might be a reason." "Exactly." Gareth wedged the pry bar into the seam and pulled. The drywall cracked, then gave way in chunks. Behind it, two beautiful oak doors emerged, complete with brass handles and an ornate lock. The lock was modern, installed within the last 30 years, if Gareth was any judge. But years of construction work had taught him that new locks were often weaker than old ones. He angled the pry bar, put his weight into it, and the lock broke free with a crack like a gunshot. The doors swung inward on hinges that barely squeaked. Beyond lay not a room but a library, vast and circular, built into what must have been a tower section of the manor. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, accessible by a wrought iron spiral staircase that wound upward to a second gallery level. But it was what sat in the center of the room that made them both stop short. A massive mahogany desk, and spread across it, dozens of documents, photographs, and what looked like architectural plans. "Someone was working here," Miriam whispered. "And recently." Gareth moved closer, Miriam at his side. The documents were meticulously organized, sorted into piles with handwritten labels. The handwriting was shaky but legible, the work of someone elderly or ill. He picked up a photograph. It showed the manor in what must have been its heyday, 1920s or 30s maybe. Well-dressed people stood on the front steps. Cars from the era lined the circular drive. Servants in uniform hovered at the edges of the frame. Another photo showed the interior, a grand ball in progress. Women in gowns, men in tails, champagne glasses catching light from massive chandeliers. Miriam was examining the architectural plans. "These are for the manor," she said. "Look, it shows the entire layout, but there's a section marked West Gallery, lower level. I don't remember seeing anything like that." Gareth spread out more documents. Legal papers, bills of sale, tax records, letters on official stationery. His construction-trained eye knew quality paper when he saw it, and these were high-grade government-issued forms. One document caught his attention. It was a deed dated March 14, 1978. His eyes scanned the text, then stopped, read it again. "Miri," he said slowly, "according to this, the manor was seized for unpaid taxes in 1978, but it says here that someone continued paying maintenance costs until 1995. "Who?" Miriam asked. Gareth flipped through more papers, found a cancelled check. The signature was shaky but clear. Catherine Ashford. Lady Catherine, Miriam breathed. From the portrait. But she died in 1964, that's what the plaque said. Different Catherine, Gareth said, finding another document. This is Catherine Ashford, born 1924, died. He squinted at a death certificate. December 3rd, 1994. So she was here, Miriam said. Living here, paying for maintenance, up until 20 years ago. And she left all of this behind. Gareth gestured at the documents. Why? Miriam was methodically going through the papers now, her retired accountant's brain organizing information faster than Gareth could follow. She'd worked 35 years at a small firm before arthritis forced her retirement. Those skills hadn't vanished. Gareth, she said suddenly, look at this. She held up a letter, typed on official stationery from something called the Heritage Preservation Trust, dated August 1994, just months before Catherine's death. Gareth read it aloud. Dear Lady Catherine, we acknowledge receipt of your latest correspondence regarding the Ashford collection. As you know, we remain committed to ensuring its preservation and eventual transfer to the National Trust, as stipulated in your family's original wishes. However, given the ongoing legal complications and the interference from certain local officials, we continue to advise maintaining absolute discretion. The collection's location must remain confidential until proper channels can guarantee its protection. Your dedication to this cause, despite your failing health, is truly admirable. With deepest respect, Thomas Whitfield, Esquire. They looked at each other. The Ashford collection, Miriam said. What collection? Gareth set down the letter and picked up another document. This one much older, yellowed with age. It appeared to be an inventory list dated 1927. His eyes scrolled down the entries. Portrait Rembrandt circa 1640. Estimated value £20,000. Sculpture Bernini circa 1655. Estimated value £15,000. Necklace Royal Commission circa 1762. Sapphire and diamond. Estimated value £30,000. The list went on and on. Pages and pages of items, each with estimated values that made Gareth's head spin, even accounting for how money in 1927 would translate to modern currency. This can't be real, he muttered. Miriam was searching through a different pile. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, opened it to a random page, and began reading. Her face went pale. Gareth, this is a diary. Catherine's diary. From 1993. She read aloud. October 17th. The pain is getting worse. Doctor says I have 6 months, perhaps a year if I'm fortunate. I've decided that's long enough to do what must be done. The collection has been hidden since Father's death in 41, kept safe from the vultures who circled even then. Now, with the manor in legal limbo, I fear what will happen when I'm gone. The local officials, particularly that awful Pierce family, they know something valuable is here. They don't know what or where, but they're waiting, circling like sharks. I won't let them have it. I won't let them sell off pieces of history to line their pockets. The collection belongs to the nation, to the people, as Father always intended. I've hidden it in the place Father showed me as a child, the gallery beneath the gallery, where even the servants didn't go. I've changed the locks, destroyed most of the old plans. Only one key remains. I'll hide it where it must be found by someone worthy, someone who comes not seeking wealth but seeking shelter. Someone like I once was. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of an old clock on a shelf, still somehow running after all these years. Someone like us, Gareth finally said. Miriam looked up from the diary, her eyes wide behind her glasses. She knew. Somehow she knew that whoever found this place would be desperate, would be here because they had nowhere else to go. Where would she hide a key? Gareth asked. They searched the library methodically, checking desk drawers, feeling along shelves, examining the undersides of furniture. Miriam was on her hands and knees checking the Persian rug when her fingers found something. "Here," she said. She'd rolled back the corner of the rug to reveal floorboards, and one board was slightly raised, a nail head protruding just enough to catch the light. Gareth pried up the board. Beneath it, a small leather pouch rested in the cavity. He lifted it out, feeling the weight of something solid inside. When he opened the pouch, a brass key fell into his palm, ornate and old, with a tag attached by a string. The tag read, in that same shaky handwriting, "West Gallery, lower level. Find truth. Protect truth." Miriam stood slowly, wincing as her knees protested. "We're really doing this?" "We've come this far," Gareth said. "I need to know, don't you?" She nodded. "But Gareth, if this is real, if there really is some kind of collection worth what those old papers suggest, we can't keep it. It's not ours." "I know that, Miri, but maybe finding it, protecting it, maybe that's why we ended up here. Maybe there's a reason we walked through that door last night." They made their way back through the manor, consulting the architectural plans Miriam had found. The West Gallery should be on the first floor, western wing, but when they arrived, they found only a large room filled with portraits and landscape paintings, nothing suggesting a lower level. Gareth studied the plans more carefully. "There," he said, pointing to a notation. "Access via main gallery, east wall." They examined the east wall, which was covered in a massive painting of a naval battle, ships exploding in golden light, waves frozen in violent beauty. The frame was 10 feet tall and wide enough to hide a door. "Help me with this," Gareth said. Together they gripped the frame's edge. It was heavy, solid, but when they pulled, it swung away from the wall on hinges, revealing exactly what the plans had promised: a door. A steel door with a modern lock, installed sometime in the last 30 or 40 years. The brass key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. Gareth turned it, and something deep within the mechanism clicked, clunked, then released with a hiss of equalized air pressure. The door opened onto darkness and descending stairs. Gareth found a light switch just inside the doorway. To his surprise, it worked. Fluorescent lights flickered to life, illuminating a stairwell that descended steeply into the earth beneath the manor. "The electricity is on," Miriam whispered. "How is the electricity on?" "Someone's been paying for it," Gareth said. "Or it's on an automatic system. Either way, we're going down." They descended 73 steps, Miriam counting each one, a habit from her accounting days. The temperature dropped as they went deeper, but it was a controlled coolness, climate-regulated, not the damp chill of an abandoned cellar. At the bottom, another steel door. The same key worked. Beyond it, a small antechamber with filing cabinets, a desk, more papers. And beyond that, a third door. This one was different, vault-style, with a combination lock built into its face. "We're not getting through that," Gareth said. "Wait." Miriam was at the desk, shuffling through papers. She found an envelope, thick cream-coloured paper, sealed with red wax. The wax seal showed the Ashford family crest, and across the front, written in that familiar shaky hand, "For the rightful heir." Gareth broke the seal carefully, pulled out a single sheet of paper. He read it once silently, then again out loud for Miriam. "My name is Catherine Ashford, and if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you are here because you had nowhere else to go. That's as it should be. My father once told me that treasures should be found by those who seek shelter, not fortune. You found shelter in these walls. Now I entrust you with what lies beyond this final door. The combination is 42, 73, 18, 91. Inside you'll find what remains of the Ashford collection, assembled over 3 centuries by my family and hidden here to protect it from those who would see it scattered and sold. It belongs to the nation, to the people, to history. Not to me and not to you. But I ask that you protect it as I have protected it, until you can deliver it to those who will care for it properly. There are dangerous people who know something of value is here. They've been waiting for me to die so they can claim it through legal tricks and corruption, Don't let them. The collection is worth approximately $580 million, according to the last appraisal in 1992. That number is surely higher now. Use that knowledge carefully, trust sparingly, and know that by finding this, you've been given purpose. We all need purpose, especially when we feel cast aside. Yours starts here. Lady Catherine Ashford, November 1994. Gareth's hands shook as he lowered the letter. Miriam had tears streaming down her face. $580 million, he whispered. Dollars, Miriam finished. They stood in silence, the weight of those words pressing down like the tons of earth and stone above them. Finally, Gareth moved to the vault door. His fingers trembled as he spun the combination dial. 42, 73, 18, 91. The lock disengaged with a heavy thunk. Gareth pulled the handle. The door, despite its weight, swung open smoothly on well-maintained hinges. Motion sensors detected their presence. Lights began turning on, section by section, revealing what lay beyond. Miriam gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Gareth felt his knees go weak. Before them stretched a gallery that must have run the entire length of the manor's foundation. Climate-controlled glass cases lined both walls, each one illuminated, each one containing something extraordinary. Paintings in ornate frames, sculptures on white pedestals, jewelry displayed on velvet stands, documents in archival boxes, artifacts carefully labeled and preserved. They walked forward in stunned silence, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Gareth recognized some pieces from art books Miriam used to check out from the library. A Rembrandt portrait, eyes following them as they passed, a sculpture that could only be Bernini, marble flowing like water frozen in time, paintings by Vermeer, Gainsborough, Reynolds. "This isn't possible," Miriam whispered. But it was. It was all here, hidden beneath an abandoned manor, protected by a dying woman's determination, waiting to be found by two people who had nothing left to lose. Gareth stopped in front of a case containing a necklace, sapphires and diamonds set in gold so pure it seemed to glow with its own light. The placard read, "Commissioned for Queen Charlotte, 1762, provenance authenticated." He turned to Miriam, saw his own shock and disbelief reflected in her face. "What do we do?" she asked. Gareth couldn't answer his wife's question because he didn't know. They stood in that underground gallery for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, walking slowly past case after case of treasures that belonged in the world's greatest museums. Each piece was meticulously labeled with a small brass placard, the artist, the date, the provenance, the estimated value. The values alone made Gareth's head spin. A Turner landscape, 12 million. A collection of medieval manuscripts, 18 million. A set of royal ceremonial swords, 7 million. On and on, piece after piece, the numbers climbing until they lost all meaning. Miriam had stopped in front of a Vermeer, a small painting of a woman reading a letter by a window. The light in the painting seemed to glow from within, impossibly beautiful. "I saw this in a book once," she said quietly. "The article said it was lost during World War II. Presumed destroyed." "Apparently not," Gareth replied. They continued deeper into the gallery. Gareth noticed that the climate control was still functioning, the temperature holding steady at exactly 62 degrees Fahrenheit, the humidity at 45%. Someone had installed this system, probably in the 1980s or 90s, and it was still running, which meant someone was still paying the electric bill. At the far end of the gallery, they found a small office space. A desk sat against the wall, its surface covered with more papers, more photographs, more pieces of Catherine Ashford's life work. Gareth sat in the chair while Miriam stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. The papers were organized chronologically, showing Catherine's efforts over decades to protect the collection. Letters to lawyers, to heritage foundations, to government officials. Most went unanswered. Some received polite deferrals. A few garnered outright hostility. One letter, dated June 1992, was from someone named Mayor Franklin Pierce. Gareth read it aloud. Lady Ashford, I'm writing to inform you that the Town Council has voted to pursue legal action regarding the Ashford estate. As you know, property taxes have not been paid since 1978, and despite your personal payments for basic utilities and maintenance, the land itself remains in arrears. We are prepared to offer you a settlement. Sign over the property to the town and we'll forgive the debt. Refuse and we'll be forced to seize the estate through foreclosure. You have 30 days to respond. Signed, Franklin Pierce, Mayor of Millbrook Township. They were trying to force her out, Miriam said, so they could take the property. And whatever they thought might be hidden here, Gareth added. He shuffled through more papers, found Catherine's response, handwritten, defiant. Mayor Pierce, the Ashford estate has been in my family for 167 years. I will not surrender it to a corrupt town council that seeks only to enrich itself at the expense of history. My lawyers will be in touch. Lady Catherine Ashford. Good for her, Miriam muttered. Gareth found another document, this one more recent, dated October 1994, just 2 months before Catherine's death. It was a will, properly notarized, listing Catherine's final wishes. Most of it was standard legal language, but one paragraph stood out. Regarding the Ashford collection, currently secured in the West Gallery lower level of the Ashford Manor, I hereby bequeath said collection to the National Heritage Trust, with the stipulation that it remain intact, never to be separated or sold piecemeal. Should the National Heritage Trust refuse or be unable to accept this bequest within 5 years of my death, the collection shall pass to the Smithsonian Institution. Should both organizations refuse, it shall be offered to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Under no circumstances shall the collection, in whole or in part, pass to any local government entity or individual residing in Millbrook Township. She made sure Pierce couldn't have it, Gareth said. But if she died in 1994, Miriam said slowly, that means the 5-year window closed in 1999. Why is the collection still here? They searched through the remaining papers, found part of the answer in a series of letters from a lawyer named Thomas Whitfield. Apparently, Catherine had hired him to execute her will, but he'd run into immediate problems. The National Heritage Trust claimed they'd never received proper documentation. The Smithsonian said the collection's provenance was questionable without authentication. The Met wanted nothing to do with anything connected to the Pierce family, who had apparently tried to sue them over an unrelated matter years earlier. Everyone passed. The collection remained hidden, trapped in legal limbo, while Catherine's final wish went unfulfilled. The last letter in the file was from Thomas Whitfield to someone named Pearl, dated March 2001. Dear Pearl, I'm writing to inform you that I've exhausted all legal avenues to transfer the Ashford collection according to Lady Catherine's wishes. The manor remains technically in foreclosure limbo, the collection remains hidden, and I fear the Pierce family is simply waiting for the right moment to make their move. I know you've been watching over the property as best you can, but we both know you can't do this forever. We need a miracle, or we need someone to stumble upon the truth, who has both the courage to expose it and nothing to lose in the fight. Until then, all we can do is wait and hope. With deep respect and shared grief, Thomas Whitfield. Gareth set down the letter and looked at his wife. We're the miracle. We're 2 broke senior citizens squatting in an abandoned mansion, Miriam corrected. We don't even have a working car. Which means we have nothing to lose, Gareth said, echoing the lawyer's words. Miri, Catherine left this for someone like us. She knew that anyone with money or power would be compromised, would be vulnerable to threats or bribes. But someone with nothing? He gestured around the vault. We can't be threatened with losing what we don't have. Miriam sat down heavily in a second chair they'd found in the corner. Gareth, this is bigger than us. $580 million. Do you understand what people do for that kind of money? what they've probably already done. I know, but what's our alternative? Walk away? Pretend we never saw this? Yes, Miriam said simply. We walk away. We find a shelter. We apply for assistance. We figure out our lives without getting involved in something that could get us killed. Gareth wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Miriam was being practical, sensible, safe. Everything she'd always been. Everything that had kept them alive and together for 43 years. But something in him resisted. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the anger still burning from being cast out by their own son. Maybe it was just the desperate need to matter one more time before he died. Let me show you something, he said. He led Miriam back through the gallery, stopping at various pieces. This Rembrandt, it shows a woman and her child. See the way the light falls on her face? That's hope, Miri. That's a mother protecting her baby. And this sculpture, the way the marble seems soft as skin, that's human hands creating beauty that lasts centuries. And this necklace, worn by a queen 262 years ago, that's history you can touch. He turned to face his wife. All of this hidden in the dark, rotting away while corrupt men wait to steal it and sell it off piece by piece. Is that right? Is that the world we want to leave behind? Miriam's eyes were wet. We can't save the world, Gareth. We couldn't even save our own family. Maybe not, but we can save this. We can do what Catherine asked. We can protect it until we can get it to people who'll care for it properly. And how do we do that? Miriam asked. We don't have money for lawyers. We don't have connections. We don't even have a phone that isn't about to die. Gareth pulled out his phone, checked the battery. 12%. Then he noticed something else. 3 bars of signal. Down here, underground, they had cell service. The electricity is on, he said slowly, which means utilities are on, which means maybe internet is on. They returned to the office area, searched and found it. A phone jack, old but present, and beside it, a modern router, its lights blinking steadily. Someone, probably Thomas Whitfield or this Pearl person, had set up internet access in the vault. Gareth's phone connected immediately to the Wi-Fi network. Password protected, but the password was written on a post-it note stuck to the router. Ashford, 1827, the year the manor was built. We can contact people, Gareth said. We can send emails, make calls, document everything. Miriam considered this. We'd need to be careful. If we contact the wrong person, if word gets out before we have protection. Then we start with the lawyer. Thomas Whitfield. Catherine trusted him. Pearl trusted him. Maybe we can too. They spent the next hour photographing the collection with Miriam's phone, which had more battery life than Gareth's. They took hundreds of photos, wide shots of the gallery, close-ups of individual pieces, details of plaques and labels, pictures of Catherine's documents and letters. Miriam's organizational skills kicked in. She created a spreadsheet on her phone, logging each piece they photographed, noting its estimated value, its location in the gallery. By the time they finished, they had a comprehensive record of everything in the vault. Now what? Miriam asked. Now we find Thomas Whitfield. A quick internet search revealed that Thomas Whitfield was still practicing law, now 81 years old, in a town called Riverside, about 40 miles from where they'd broken down. His website showed a small practice specializing in estate law and historical preservation. Gareth composed an email on his phone, writing and rewriting it a dozen times before settling on, Mr. Whitfield, my name is Gareth Caldwell. My wife Miriam and I have taken shelter in the Ashford Manor. We have found the collection. We have found Lady Catherine's letters and your correspondence with her. We understand the danger and the importance of what's hidden here. We need your help. We have documentation and are willing to meet anywhere you deem safe. Please respond if you remember Catherine and Pearl and believe that truth is worth protecting. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Now we wait, he said. They returned upstairs. carefully locking each door behind them, replacing the painting over the entrance to the stairs. In the library, they gathered up the most important documents, the ones that showed the collection's provenance, Catherine's will, the correspondence with various heritage organizations. Miriam found a leather satchel in one of the rooms, perfect for carrying papers. They loaded it carefully, treating each document like the historical artifact it was. "We should eat something," Miriam said, checking her watch. It was past 2 in the afternoon. They'd been exploring the manor and the vault for over 6 hours. They returned to their temporary bedroom, where Gareth opened their last can of soup, this one chicken noodle. They ate it cold, too tired to bother with the camping stove. The soup tasted like nothing, but it filled the hollow in their stomachs. Gareth checked his email obsessively, refreshing every few minutes. Nothing. Maybe Whitfield didn't check his email regularly. Maybe he thought it was spam or a prank. Or maybe he was already calling someone and not the right someone. "We should take shifts sleeping," Gareth said, "just in case." "In case of what?" Miriam asked. "In case those people Catherine mentioned in her diary decide to come looking. You sleep first. I'll keep watch." Miriam was too exhausted to argue. She lay down on the bed, still in her clothes, and was asleep within minutes. Gareth sat in a chair by the window, watching the driveway, his phone in his lap. The afternoon faded into evening. Shadows stretched across the overgrown grounds. Gareth's eyes grew heavy despite his determination to stay alert. He was 68 years old. His body wasn't built for this kind of stress anymore. His phone buzzed. Gareth jerked awake, realized he'd been dozing. The screen showed an email notification. From Thomas Whitfield. Gareth opened it with trembling fingers. "Mr. Caldwell, I have waited 30 years for someone to send me an email like yours. I am in my car and will arrive at the Ashford Manor in approximately 90 minutes. Do not open the door for anyone else. Do not tell anyone else you are there. There are people watching that property who would do terrible things to possess what you've found. I am bringing a colleague from the FBI Art Crime Team and a representative from the National Heritage Foundation. We will need to verify what you've discovered and, if it is authentic, arrange for its immediate protection and transfer. Please confirm you received this message and that you will wait for us. Also, please confirm that you and your wife are unharmed and acting of your own free will. This situation attracts predators. I need to know you are genuine. Thomas Whitfield." Gareth immediately replied, "Mr. Whitfield, we are genuine. We are unharmed. We are waiting. We have documented the entire collection. We have Catherine's papers. We understand we have no legal claim to any of this and want only to see it protected as she intended. We will be watching for your arrival. Gareth Caldwell." He woke Miriam gently. "Miri," he answered, "the lawyer. He's coming, and he's bringing people who can help." Miriam sat up, rubbing her eyes. "How long?" 90 minutes when he sent the email, maybe an hour now. They spent that hour cleaning themselves up as best they could, changing into slightly less rumpled clothes from their suitcases, trying to look like responsible adults rather than desperate squatters. Miriam found a bathroom with running water, cold but functional, and they both washed their faces, combed their hair, tried to appear presentable. Gareth kept watch at the window. Right on schedule, headlights appeared on the drive. 3 vehicles, a black sedan, a dark SUV, and a white van. They pulled up to the front entrance and parked. Gareth and Miriam hurried downstairs. Through the front windows, they could see people getting out of the vehicles. An elderly man with white hair moving stiffly. A younger woman in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. 2 men in FBI windbreakers, several people with camera equipment and document cases. Gareth opened the front door before anyone could knock. The elderly man looked at him, eyes sharp despite his age. "Gareth Caldwell?" "Yes, sir. Thomas Whitfield?" "I am." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Agent Marissa Delacroix, FBI Art Crime Team. and this is Dr. Helena Corwin from the National Heritage Foundation. May we come in?" "Please." Gareth stepped back. The group entered, maybe 8 people in total. They stood in the grand entrance hall, looking around with a mixture of awe and professional assessment. Thomas Whitfield turned to Gareth and Miriam. "Before we go any further, I need to understand how you came to be here. Start from the beginning." So they did. Standing in that vast hallway, surrounded by strangers, Gareth and Miriam told their story. The betrayal by their son, the desperate drive through the storm, the broken-down car, stumbling upon the manor seeking shelter, finding the library, the key, the vault. They held nothing back. The shame, the fear, the desperation. If these people were going to help, they needed to know the truth. When they finished, the hall was silent. Thomas Whitfield had tears in his eyes. "Catherine knew," he said softly. "She told me once that the collection would be found by people who needed shelter, not fortune. I thought she was being poetic, but she was being literal." Agent Delacroix spoke up, her voice professional, but not unkind. "We need to see what you found. Can you take us to it? What happens next will test this couple's integrity, put them in danger, and force them to decide between their own survival and doing what's right. The discovery they've made is bigger than they ever imagined, and the people who've been watching the manor are about to make their move. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more." Gareth led the group through the manor, retracing the path he and Miriam had taken that morning. When they reached the West Gallery and the naval painting concealing the door, several people gasped. "I've been researching this estate for 20 years, Dr. Corwin said. "I never knew there was a lower level." Gareth moved the painting aside, revealing the door. The group descended the 73 steps in silence, the only sound their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. When Gareth opened the vault door and the lights came on, revealing the gallery beyond, 3 people actually stopped walking. One of the FBI agents put his hand on his weapon reflexively, as if beauty this profound could be dangerous. Maybe it was. They entered slowly, reverently. Dr. Corwin moved immediately to the Rembrandt, pulled out a magnifying glass, examined the surface. "Oh my God," she breathed. "This is real. This is actually real." Agent Delacroix was more methodical, photographing everything, documenting the layout, the climate control systems, the security measures. Thomas Whitfield headed straight for the office area, where he began reading through Catherine's papers with the hunger of a man who'd waited 3 decades for answers. For the next 4 hours, the team worked. Dr. Corwin and her assistants examined piece after piece, cross-referencing with databases, checking provenances, verifying authenticity. The FBI agents secured the perimeter, checked for signs of tampering or surveillance, documented everything for their official report. Gareth and Miriam stood back, watching. This was no longer their discovery. It belonged to history now, to the proper authorities, to the world. Finally, Dr. Corwin returned to where Gareth and Miriam waited near the entrance. Her face was flushed with excitement and something like disbelief. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell," she said formally, "on behalf of the National Heritage Foundation, I need to inform you that you have discovered one of the most significant art collections in American history. Preliminary assessment suggests a current value exceeding $800 million. Many of these pieces were thought lost or destroyed. Their recovery is, quite simply, miraculous." "It was Catherine's doing," Miriam said quietly, "not ours." "Nevertheless," Dr. Corwin continued, "there are protocols for finders of such collections. Typically, a finder's fee is calculated based on a percentage of the total value. In this case, given the extraordinary circumstances and your clear intention to ensure proper preservation rather than personal gain, I believe the Foundation will recommend a finder's fee of 2.5%. Gareth did the math in his head. 2.5% of $800 million, $20 million. "We don't want it," he said. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The room went silent. "Excuse me?" Dr. Corwin said. "We don't want $20 million, Gareth repeated. "Give us enough to get back on our feet, help us find a decent place to live, but the rest, use it to maintain the collection, to exhibit it properly, to do what Catherine wanted. We didn't find this to get rich. We found it because we had nowhere else to go." Thomas Whitfield approached, leaning heavily on a cane. "Mr. Caldwell, that's a very noble sentiment, but you need to understand what you're refusing. That money could change your life." "Our lives are already changed," Miriam said, speaking up for the first time in hours. "We spent 43 years building something, raising children, trying to do right. Then we lost it all in one night because we trusted the wrong people. We're not making that mistake again." She looked around at the treasures surrounding them. "This collection, it's not about money. It's about beauty and history and the things humans create that outlast us. Catherine understood that. She gave up everything to protect it. The least we can do is honor that." Agent Delacroix stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, I appreciate your integrity truly, but I need to warn you of something. There are people who know or suspect something valuable is here. Once word gets out about this discovery, and it will get out, those people will look for someone to blame, someone to target. If you refuse the finder's fee, you'll have no resources to protect yourselves." "What are you saying?" Gareth asked. "I'm saying take enough money to be safe, set up a trust, hire security if needed, relocate if necessary. You can donate the rest if you want, but don't make yourselves vulnerable out of principle." Gareth and Miriam looked at each other, that wordless communication of long-married couples. Finally, Miriam nodded. $5 million, Gareth said. "We'll take $5 million. The rest goes to the foundation to preserve and exhibit the collection as Catherine wanted." Thomas Whitfield smiled. "I think Catherine would approve." They were finishing the documentation when the sound of engines echoed from above. Not just one or two vehicles, but many. The FBI agents immediately drew their weapons and moved toward the stairs. "Everyone stay here," Agent Delacroix ordered. She and her partner ascended quickly. The remaining group waited in tense silence. They could hear voices upstairs, angry, demanding. Then footsteps, multiple people descending. Gareth instinctively moved in front of Miriam. Agent Delacroix returned, her expression grim. "We have a situation. There's a group of men outside claiming they're from the township government. They have what appears to be an emergency seizure order for the property. They're demanding access." "On what grounds?" Thomas Whitfield demanded. "They claim the electricity consumption over the past 24 hours triggered an alert. They're asserting the property is occupied illegally and poses a safety hazard that requires immediate inspection." "That's garbage," Thomas spat. "They've been waiting for any excuse." "I agree," Agent Delacroix said. "But they have local police with them, and technically Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell are trespassing. The property is still in foreclosure limbo. Legally, it's complicated." "How many people?" Gareth asked. 8, maybe 10. Led by someone who says he's mayor of Millbrook Township. Name of Everett Pierce." Thomas's face went white. "Franklin Pierce's son. He's been mayor for 15 years, even more corrupt than his father." "He can't have this," Miriam said fiercely. "Catherine specifically said no one from Millbrook Township could claim the collection." "And that will hold up in court," Thomas assured her. "But it might take weeks or months to sort out. Meanwhile, they'll try to tie everything up in legal proceedings, claim the collection was illegally hidden, argue about jurisdiction and ownership." "Then we don't give them that chance," Dr. Corwin said. She pulled out her phone, made a call. "William, Helena Corwin, I need you to immediately file an emergency petition with the Federal Historic Preservation Office. We have a collection that falls under the Antiquities Protection Act, and it's under immediate threat from local government seizure. I'm sending you documentation now." She hung up and looked at Agent Delacroix. I just bought us maybe 2 hours. After that, this becomes a federal case. The local government won't have jurisdiction. 2 hours, Agent Delacroix muttered. We need to hold them off for 2 hours. Upstairs, the pounding on the front door intensified. Voices shouted, demanding entry. Someone threatened to break down the door. Let me talk to them, Gareth said. Mr. Caldwell, these are not reasonable people, Thomas warned. Neither am I. Not anymore. Gareth started up the stairs. Miriam grabbed his arm. Gareth, don't! I'm not letting them in, he assured her. I'm just going to remind them that some things are worth fighting for. He climbed the stairs, Agent Delacroix and her partner following. At the main floor, they could hear the commotion at the front door. Gareth walked through the entrance hall and stopped just inside the door. Who's out there? He called. My name is Mayor Everett Pierce, a voice answered. I'm the mayor of Millbrook Township, and you're trespassing on municipal property. Open this door immediately, or we will force entry. This isn't municipal property, Gareth called back. It's in private ownership under legal dispute. You have no authority here. I have an emergency seizure order signed by Judge Crawford. Open the door or face arrest. Gareth looked at Agent Delacroix, who shook her head. Judge Crawford is in Pierce's pocket, she whispered. That order probably isn't worth the paper it's printed on, but local cops won't know that. Gareth turned back to the door. I have federal agents in here from the FBI Art Crime Division. I have representatives from the National Heritage Foundation. We're in the process of documenting historical artifacts under federal protection. You force your way in, you'll be interfering with a federal investigation. Silence from outside. Then, you're bluffing. Agent Delacroix stepped forward. This is Special Agent Marissa Delacroix, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Mayor Pierce, I suggest you contact your attorney before you do something that lands you in federal prison. This site is now under FBI protection as part of an ongoing art theft investigation. More silence. Then hushed voices, arguing. Finally, we'll be back with a federal warrant. You do that, Agent Delacroix called. We'll be here. The sound of engines starting, vehicles pulling away. But Gareth noticed 2 cars remained. Watching, waiting. He turned to Agent Delacroix. They're not giving up. No, she agreed. They're regrouping. We have maybe an hour before they return with more people, more lawyers, more pressure. They returned to the vault, where the team was frantically photographing, cataloging, and documenting everything they could. Dr. Corwin was on her phone almost constantly, coordinating with her superiors, with federal agencies, with preservation experts. Thomas Whitfield pulled Gareth aside. There's something you need to know. The Pierce family, they've been manipulating Millbrook Township for 3 generations. Franklin Pierce tried to force Catherine to sell in the 90s. When she refused, he had her investigated, harassed, even had her hospitalized at one point, claiming she was mentally unfit. She fought them all, but it cost her everything. Why? Gareth asked. Why were they so determined? Because Franklin's grandfather, Walter Pierce, was the original trustee of the Ashford estate when the family fell on hard times in the 30s. He had access to records, knew about the collection. When the family died out and the estate went into limbo, the Pierces thought they could claim it through legal maneuvering. Catherine stopped them, but barely. Now Everett is trying to finish what his father and grandfather started. Over our dead bodies, Miriam said. She'd appeared beside Gareth silently. That might be literal, Thomas warned. The Pierce family doesn't lose. They've destroyed people who got in their way. Then this time will be different, Gareth said. The next hour passed in focused activity. The team documented everything they could, created backup files, uploaded data to secure servers. Dr. Corwin received confirmation that the federal petition had been filed and accepted. The collection was now officially under federal protection. But the local authorities didn't know that yet. Right on schedule, the vehicles returned. This time there were more. At least 15 cars and trucks, including 2 police cruisers and what looked like a news van. "They brought media," Agent Delacroix said, watching from a window. "Smart, makes it harder for us to act without scrutiny." "Or makes it harder for them to act illegally," Miriam countered, "if they're on camera." Dr. Corwin finished another call. "The director of the National Heritage Foundation is on his way. He'll be here in 3 hours. Once he arrives and makes an official statement, this becomes a media story about heritage preservation, not about property disputes." 3 hours, Gareth said. "Can we hold them off that long?" "We have to." This time, Mayor Pierce didn't bother knocking. He set up a portable speaker system outside the front door and started making announcements. "The township of Millbrook has legal authority over this property. The people inside are trespassing and interfering with official business. We are prepared to use all necessary force to secure this property for public safety." Cameras from the news van captured everything. A reporter did a stand-up in front of the manor. "We're here at the historic Ashford estate, where a standoff is developing between township officials and unknown occupants who claim to be federal agents. Sources tell us this property has been abandoned for decades, though exactly who has the legal right to be here remains unclear. We'll continue to monitor this developing story." Gareth watched from the window. Something about the reporter's presence felt like protection. Pierce couldn't do anything too illegal with cameras rolling, but he could make their lives difficult. Over the next 2 hours, Pierce's people tried everything. They cut the power to the manor, but the vault's climate control had backup generators that kicked in immediately. They blocked the driveway with trucks, trapping everyone inside. They called in building inspectors who declared the structure unsafe and demanded immediate evacuation. Agent Delacroix countered each move with federal authority. The power was turned back on. The inspectors were informed they had no jurisdiction over a federal investigation site. The driveway blockade was declared unlawful interference. It became a chess match, each side maneuvering, neither willing to back down. Gareth and Miriam stayed in the vault with the team, now just waiting. They'd done what they could. The collection was documented, protected, legally secured. Now it was up to people with more power and authority to finish the job. "I keep thinking about Catherine," Miriam said quietly. "She fought this battle alone for decades, died alone, trying to protect all this. I hope wherever she is, she knows someone finally finished what she started." "She knows," Thomas Whitfield said. He'd been reading through more of Catherine's diary. "Listen to this entry from November 1994, just a month before she died. I'm so tired. The pain is constant now. The lawyers tell me there's no one left to fight for this. The heritage organizations won't commit. The museums are afraid of the legal complications. The Pierce family circles like vultures. I'm starting to think I've failed, that all of Father's work, all of our family's dedication to preserving beauty for future generations will end with me. But then I remember what Father told me when I was a child. He said truth has a weight of its own. It may take years, decades, even centuries, but eventually truth settles where it belongs. The collection will be found. By whom, I cannot say, but I have to believe it will be found by someone who understands that some things are more important than personal gain. Someone who needs shelter, not fortune. Someone like me, when I was young and the world was unkind. To that person, whoever you are, whenever you find this, thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for protecting what I could not protect alone. You are the heir I never had, the family I always needed. Do not let the darkness win. Lady Catherine Ashford." The room was silent except for the soft hum of climate control. Miriam was crying openly. Gareth felt something break inside his chest, some wall he'd built around his heart to protect himself from disappointment. "We won't let the darkness win," he promised. At exactly 6:17 p.m., new vehicles arrived. These were different. Black SUVs with federal plates, a convoy of official vehicles that radiated authority. People emerged in suits and ties, carrying briefcases and credentials. The director of the National Heritage Foundation, a distinguished man in his 60s named Marcus Wellington, walked straight up to Mayor Pierce and handed him a document. From the window, Gareth could see Pierce's face go from confident to furious as he read. 5 minutes later, Agent Delacroix's phone rang. She listened, smiled, and hung up. "It's over," she announced. "Federal court has issued an injunction. The Ashford collection is officially under federal protection. The property is designated a temporary federal historic site. Mayor Pierce and everyone from Millbrook Township have been ordered to vacate immediately." Cheers erupted in the vault. People hugged, laughed. Some cried. Dr. Corwin shook Gareth's hand, then Miriam's. "You did it. You actually did it." "Catherine did it," Miriam corrected. "We just happened to be here." "No," Thomas Whitfield said. "Catherine laid the foundation, but you built the house. She would be so proud." They emerged from the vault as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Outside, the Millbrook Township vehicles were pulling away, Pierce standing beside his car, glaring at the manor with undisguised hatred. The news crew was still there, now interviewing Marcus Wellington. Gareth caught fragments. "Extraordinary discovery, national treasure, preserved for the American people. Remarkable couple who found it." A reporter spotted Gareth and Miriam emerging from the manor and rushed over. "Sir, ma'am, can you tell us how you found the collection?" Gareth looked at Miriam. She squeezed his hand. "We got lost," Gareth said simply. "Sometimes getting lost is how you find what matters." The reporter pressed for more, but Agent Delacroix intervened, politely but firmly moving the media back. Marcus Wellington approached Gareth and Miriam, extending his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, on behalf of the National Heritage Foundation and, frankly, on behalf of history itself, thank you. What you've preserved here is invaluable." "What happens now?" Miriam asked. "Now we move the collection to a secure facility where it can be properly restored and prepared for exhibition. The Ashford Manor itself will be preserved as a historic site, part of the story. And you two, you'll be taken care of. Housing, financial security, whatever you need." "We just need enough," Gareth said. "Enough to not be desperate again." "You'll have much more than that," Wellington assured them. "The finder's fee you agreed to, plus the story rights, speaking engagements, endorsements. You're going to be national news, you understand that?" Gareth hadn't understood that. The weight of it settled over him like a heavy coat. That night, they were moved to a hotel, a nice one, with a real bed and hot showers and room service. Agent Delacroix posted guards outside their door, just as a precaution, though she assured them the threat from Pierce had been neutralized. Gareth stood in the shower for 20 minutes, letting hot water wash away 3 days of fear and uncertainty. When he emerged, Miriam was sitting on the bed in a white hotel robe, staring at her phone. "Dalton called," she said quietly. 17 times. Lennox sent texts. Callista sent an email. They all saw the news. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. I don't know what to say." Gareth sat beside her. "You don't have to say anything. They made their choice. They're still our children. And we're still their parents. But that doesn't mean we have to let them back in just because we found something valuable." Miriam leaned against him. "When did we get so hard?" "We're not hard. We're just done being used." They sat in silence, watching lights from the city below, two old people who'd been cast aside and found something precious in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring more interviews, more lawyers, more complications. But tonight, for the first time in months, they slept without fear, without cold, without the crushing weight of having nowhere to go. They'd found shelter in a crumbling manor. What they'd really found was purpose, dignity, and proof that sometimes the people who lose everything are exactly the ones meant to find what truly matters. The morning after their first night in the hotel, Gareth woke to find Miriam already dressed, sitting at the small desk with her phone, scrolling through what looked like hundreds of messages. The television was on, muted, but he could see their faces on the screen, a photo someone must have taken yesterday outside the manor. "We're famous," Miriam said without looking up. "Or infamous. I can't tell which yet." Gareth sat up, his back protesting. Even a good mattress couldn't erase 68 years of construction work. "What are people saying?" "Everything. Some are calling us heroes. Others say we're opportunists who should have reported the collection immediately instead of spending 2 days in the manor. There's a whole thread on some forum debating whether we planned this, whether we somehow knew about the collection before we arrived." "That's insane. That's the internet." Miriam finally looked at him, and he saw exhaustion in her eyes that sleep hadn't touched. "Gareth, they found out about Dalton, about why we were on that road. Someone dug into our background, and now it's all over social media. Our son throwing us out, the money we gave him, everything." Gareth's chest tightened. "How?" "Public records, probably. Maybe someone from the neighborhood talked. Does it matter? It's out there now." A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Delacroix entered when Gareth called out, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee and a folder thick with documents. "Good morning," she said, though her tone suggested it wasn't particularly good. "We need to talk about security and next steps. The media presence outside the hotel has tripled overnight. We're going to move you to a secure location within the hour." "Why?" Gareth asked. "I thought Pierce was dealt with." "Pierce is contained," Delacroix corrected. "But we've been monitoring communications, and there's chatter. People talking about the collection's value, about you two, about what it might take to get information or access. You need to understand that you're sitting on knowledge worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That makes you targets." Miriam set down her phone. "What kind of chatter?" "The kind that mentions your son's address, your daughter in Oregon, old friends from your neighborhood. People are being contacted, questioned, offered money for information about you." Gareth felt sick. "We brought this down on them." "No," Delacroix said firmly. "They brought it on themselves by abandoning you. And now, ironically, your fame might be the only thing protecting them. It's hard to hurt someone quietly when cameras are watching." Thomas Whitfield arrived 30 minutes later, accompanied by a younger woman he introduced as his associate, Jennifer Walsh. They spread documents across the hotel room's small table, while Gareth and Miriam tried to absorb information coming at them from all directions. "The good news," Thomas said, "is that the federal injunction is holding. The collection is secure, being transferred to climate-controlled storage as we speak. The bad news is that Mayor Pierce has filed 17 different legal challenges, claiming everything from theft to fraud to elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" Miriam repeated. "Against who?" "Against you," Jennifer explained. "He's claiming that you're being manipulated by the Heritage Foundation and the FBI, that you're not competent to make decisions about the collection, that you need a court-appointed guardian." "That's ridiculous," Gareth said. "Of course it is," Thomas agreed. "But it's also strategic. If he can tie this up in competency hearings, he delays everything, creates doubt, and maybe finds a sympathetic judge who'll order psychiatric evaluations, financial reviews, the whole nightmare." "Can he actually do that?" Miriam asked. "He can try," Jennifer said, "which is why we need you to be proactive. We've arranged for independent medical evaluations by 3 different doctors, all highly respected. We'll document your competency beyond any doubt. We've also prepared a detailed timeline of events showing you acted rationally, ethically, and in good faith throughout." Agent Delacroix added, "And I've requested a full investigation into the Pierce family's activities over the past 40 years. If they've been doing what Catherine's diaries suggest, we'll find evidence." The secure location turned out to be a small apartment in a gated community 40 miles from the manor, rented under a corporate name, with security cameras and an agent posted outside. It was comfortable but isolating. Gareth and Miriam spent their days in legal meetings, medical evaluations, and carefully controlled media appearances. Marcus Wellington from the Heritage Foundation visited regularly, updating them on the collection's authentication process. Each piece was being examined by experts, its provenance verified, its condition assessed. So far, every single item had proven authentic. The collection's value kept climbing. 800 million became 900 million, then crossed 1 billion. "There's a Vermeer we thought was destroyed in World War II, Marcus told them during one visit. Art historians are weeping over its recovery, literally weeping. What you found, it's rewriting history." But the praise felt distant, abstract. Gareth and Miriam were living in a strange limbo, neither poor nor truly free, protected but imprisoned, famous but isolated. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the discovery. Gareth was watching the news when a report came on about Millbrook Township. The reporter stood in front of the town hall, explaining that the FBI had raided multiple locations that morning, including the mayor's office, the courthouse, and several private residences. "Sources tell us this is connected to the Ashford Manor investigation," the reporter said. "Federal prosecutors are reportedly building a case involving fraud, conspiracy, and corruption dating back decades. Mayor Everett Pierce was taken into custody this morning and has refused to comment." Gareth called for Miriam. They watched together as the story unfolded. Documents had been found, emails recovered, financial records subpoenaed. The investigation had uncovered not just plans to steal the Ashford collection, but evidence of a long-running scheme to manipulate property foreclosures throughout the region. The Pierce family, it turned out, had been doing to other people what they'd tried to do to Catherine Ashford, buying up foreclosed properties through shell companies, selling them to multiple buyers, pocketing the money. Over 30 families had been defrauded over 40 years, and Gareth and Miriam's discovery had exposed it all. "We did this," Miriam whispered. "We brought them down." Thomas Whitfield called minutes later. "Did you see?" "We saw," Gareth said. "What happens now?" "Now everything changes. With Pierce in custody and evidence of criminal activity, all his legal challenges collapse. The competency claims, the elder abuse accusations, everything. He has no credibility. More importantly, the other victims are coming forward. People who lost homes, businesses, life savings. They're filing a class action lawsuit, and they want to meet you." "Why?" Gareth asked. "Because you gave them hope. You proved that standing up to corrupt power is possible. You're not just the couple who found a treasure. You're the couple who exposed injustice." The meeting with the other victims happened a week later, in a community centre in Riverside, the town where Thomas Whitfield practiced law. Gareth and Miriam arrived nervous, uncertain what to expect. The room was packed. At least 70 people, ranging from elderly couples to young families, all affected by Pierce's schemes. When Gareth and Miriam entered, everyone stood and applauded. A woman in her 50s approached first. "My name is Eleanor Marsh. My parents lost their farm to foreclosure in 2003. They thought it was their fault that they'd failed. They died thinking they'd failed. But now we know the truth. The foreclosure was rigged. Pierce's people manipulated the process. Your discovery led investigators to documents that prove it. My parents didn't fail. They were victims." She hugged Miriam, tears streaming down both their faces. One by one, others shared their stories. Homes lost, businesses destroyed, families torn apart by financial ruin that wasn't their fault. And now, because Gareth and Miriam had stumbled into a manor seeking shelter, the truth was finally coming out. A young man named Marcus spoke last. "I was 8 when we lost our house. I remember my dad crying, something I'd never seen before. I grew up thinking he was weak, that we were weak. Now I'm 26 and I finally understand. We weren't weak, we were targeted. And if you two hadn't found that collection, hadn't stood up to Pierce, we'd never have known. You gave us back our dignity." Gareth didn't know what to say. He looked at these people, saw his own pain reflected in their eyes, and realized something profound. They hadn't just found a collection. They'd found a key that unlocked decades of hidden truth. "We didn't do anything special," he finally said. "We just refused to walk away." "That's everything," Eleanor replied. "Refusing to walk away when it's easier to quit, that's everything." The legal proceedings moved quickly after that. With Pierce in custody and evidence mounting, his entire network began to collapse. Associates turned on each other, making deals, providing testimony. Judge Crawford, who'd signed the fraudulent seizure order, was suspended pending investigation. The county prosecutor, who'd ignored complaints about the Pierce family for years, resigned. And through it all, Gareth and Miriam became symbols, not just of the treasure they'd found, but of ordinary people standing against corruption. Interview requests poured in. 60 Minutes wanted their story. The New York Times was writing a feature. Publishers offered book deals. But Gareth and Miriam remained cautious, doing only carefully selected appearances, always focusing on Catherine Ashford's legacy rather than their own circumstances. "This isn't about us," Miriam told one persistent reporter. "This is about a woman who spent her entire life protecting something beautiful, and about the institutions that tried to steal it. We just happened to be there when the truth needed to come out." But privately, in their temporary apartment, the weight of it all was crushing. Gareth developed insomnia, lying awake wondering if they'd done the right thing, if the attention and danger were worth it. Miriam's arthritis flared from stress, her hands aching constantly. And then there were the phone calls from their children. Dalton called twice a day now, leaving voicemails full of apologies and explanations. "Mom, Dad, I was wrong. I see that now. Lennox and we were stressed about money, about the business failing, and we took it out on you. But we're family. Can we please talk?" Callista sent emails, long, rambling messages about how she'd always loved them, how distance and her demanding career had kept her away, but she wanted to reconnect, wanted to be part of their lives again. Miriam read each message, and Gareth watched her heart break a little more each time. "They only care because we found something valuable," he said after another voicemail from Dalton. "Maybe," Miriam replied. "Or maybe seeing us on television, seeing how close they came to losing us forever, maybe that changed them. People can change, Gareth." "Can they? Or do they just change tactics?" It was Thomas Whitfield who provided perspective. He visited one evening, bringing Chinese takeout and wisdom earned from decades of family law. "I've seen this pattern before," he said as they ate. "Estranged families reuniting after sudden wealth. Sometimes it's genuine, more often it's not. Here's what I tell my clients. Give it time. If your children truly want a relationship, they'll still want it in 6 months, a year, when the cameras are gone and the money is settled. If they only want access to fortune, they'll fade away when they realize you're not going to be their meal ticket." "And if we're wrong to shut them out?" Miriam asked. "What if we're being cruel?" "You're not shutting them out," Thomas said gently. "You're protecting yourselves while you heal. There's a difference. You two have been through trauma, betrayal by the people who should have protected you. Healing takes time. Anyone who truly loves you will understand that." Gareth reached across the table and took Miriam's hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." 3 months after finding the collection, the National Heritage Foundation hosted a press conference announcing the official authentication results. Marcus Wellington stood at a podium flanked by art historians, museum directors, and federal officials. "The Ashford collection," he announced, "consists of 137 pieces spanning 4 centuries. Current value is estimated at $1.2 billion. It represents one of the most significant art discoveries in American history, and it would have been lost forever if not for the courage and integrity of Gareth and Miriam Caldwell." Gareth and Miriam sat in the front row, uncomfortable in borrowed formal clothes, cameras flashing constantly. When Wellington invited them to the podium, Miriam gripped Gareth's arm so hard he felt her nails through his jacket. They stood together at the microphone, facing a room full of reporters and officials and important people. Gareth opened his mouth, then closed it, overwhelmed. Miriam spoke instead, her voice quiet but steady. "We don't feel brave. We were just two scared people looking for shelter in a storm. What we found taught us something important. Beauty and truth have weight. They matter. They endure. Lady Catherine Ashford understood that. She gave everything to protect something bigger than herself. We hope we did the same." The applause was deafening. Afterwards, in a quiet corner, Agent Delacroix pulled them aside. "The investigation is wrapping up. We've recovered enough evidence to prosecute Pierce and 17 associates. The other victims are getting restitution, and you two, you're free. No more security detail, no more safe house. You can go anywhere, be anyone you want." "What if we don't know who we want to be?" Gareth asked. Delacroix smiled. "Then I guess you get to figure that out. Most people never get a second chance to reinvent themselves. You've earned it." That night, lying in bed in their temporary apartment, Gareth and Miriam talked about the future for the first time in months. "We could travel," Miriam suggested. "See the places we always talked about but never could afford." "We could buy a small house," Gareth added. "Nothing fancy, just something that's ours." "We could volunteer," Miriam said. "Help other seniors who are being taken advantage of." "We could do all of it," Gareth replied. "We have time now, and money, and purpose." Miriam rolled over to face him, and in the dim light he saw not the exhausted, heartbroken woman who'd stood on that sidewalk 3 months ago, but someone stronger, fiercer, renewed. "We survived," she said. "We found something impossible and protected it. We exposed corruption and helped other victims. We did all that while our own children had abandoned us, and the world thought we were nothing. If we can do that, Gareth, we can do anything." He kissed her forehead. "Then let's do everything." The money arrived in their account 6 months after they found the collection. $5 million, as they'd agreed, though the foundation had tried repeatedly to convince them to take more. Gareth logged into the bank app on his phone one Tuesday morning and stared at the balance until Miriam asked if he was okay. "It's real," he said, showing her the screen. "I kept thinking maybe it would fall through somehow, some legal complication or technical error, but it's real." They sat together on the couch of their new apartment, this one not temporary, not borrowed, but actually theirs, looking at numbers that represented more money than they'd earned in 40 years of work combined. "What do we do first?" Miriam asked. "We pay off every medical bill we've been carrying," Gareth said. "Then we set up that trust Thomas suggested, make sure we're protected. Then we figure out the rest." But the rest figured itself out faster than they expected. Within days of the transfer becoming public knowledge, the requests started pouring in. Not just from media or publishers, but from people who needed help. Elderly couples facing foreclosure, single parents drowning in medical debt, veterans who'd fallen through the cracks of the system. Hundreds of letters arrived at Thomas Whitfield's office, forwarded from the Heritage Foundation, sent to the FBI field office. People who'd heard their story and saw in Gareth and Miriam not celebrities but survivors who understood struggle. Miriam read every single letter. She organized them by need, by urgency, by the stories that broke her heart most completely. Gareth watched his wife transform from someone who'd been beaten down by life into someone with purpose that blazed like fire. "We can't help everyone," he warned gently. "No," Miriam agreed, "but we can help some, and those some can help others. It ripples, Gareth. Kindness ripples." They started small. A family in Tennessee about to lose their home to medical bankruptcy. Gareth and Miriam paid off the debt, $53,000, and the family got to stay. A veteran in Ohio who needed surgery he couldn't afford. They covered it, and he walked without pain for the first time in 8 years. Word spread. Not through publicity, but through whispers, through the networks of people who lived on the edges, who understood that sometimes survival meant asking for help from strangers. Thomas Whitfield helped them formalize it. The Second Chance Trust, dedicated to helping people in crisis situations, particularly the elderly and those abandoned by their families. Miriam ran it with the same precision she'd brought to her accounting career, tracking every dollar, ensuring every recipient truly needed help. "We're not a charity for the lazy," she told one reporter who questioned their selection process. "We're a lifeline for people who've worked hard their whole lives and hit circumstances beyond their control. There's a difference." By the end of the first year, they'd helped 147 people. The trust grew as others donated, inspired by Gareth and Miriam's example. Wealthy benefactors who'd heard their story contributed. Corporations looking for positive publicity partnered with them. The initial $5 million became 7, then 10. But money was only part of what they built. The Ashford Manor, after months of restoration and preparation, opened as a museum on a cool October morning, exactly 1 year after Gareth and Miriam had stumbled through its doors seeking shelter. The ceremony was elaborate, attended by dignitaries and art lovers from around the world, but Gareth and Miriam insisted on one addition to the program. Pearl showed up. She was 76, thin and weathered, with hands that shook slightly as she gripped Gareth's arm climbing the manor steps. She'd been Catherine Ashford's housekeeper, her friend, her silent guardian for decades. When Thomas Whitfield had mentioned her in those old letters, Gareth had tracked her down, found her living alone in a trailer park 50 miles away. "I watched this place for years," Pearl told them during their first meeting. "After Catherine died, I couldn't afford to do much, but I came by monthly, made sure no one broke in, kept the worst of nature from reclaiming it. I always hoped someone would find what Catherine hid. I just never expected it would take so long." Gareth and Miriam had insisted Pearl be at the opening, not as a guest, but as an honored protector. When Marcus Wellington gave his speech, he called Pearl to the stage. "This woman," Wellington said, gesturing to Pearl's frail form, "represents something we often overlook in our celebration of grand discoveries. She represents faithfulness. For 20 years, with no recognition, no payment, often at personal cost, she protected this place because she'd made a promise to a friend. The collection survived not just because of Lady Catherine's foresight or the Caldwell's integrity, but because Pearl Matthews never gave up." The applause was thunderous. Pearl cried, and Miriam cried with her, and by the time they left the stage, something had shifted. Pearl wasn't just a historical footnote anymore. She was family. She moved into the cottage Gareth and Miriam had bought, a small 2-bedroom place with a garden and a porch swing, 20 minutes from the museum. They didn't ask her permission, just showed up at her trailer one day with boxes and said, "You're coming home." Pearl had protested, said she couldn't accept such generosity, that she'd managed fine on her own. Miriam had cut through the objections with characteristic bluntness. "We don't have children who want us," she said. "You don't have anyone looking after you, so we look after each other. That's how this works now." The three of them became inseparable. Pearl taught Miriam about the manor's history, the stories Catherine had shared during long evenings when the old woman's health was failing. Gareth built raised garden beds so Pearl's arthritic back wouldn't prevent her from growing the tomatoes she loved. They ate dinner together every night, 3 people cast aside by circumstance who'd found each other in the aftermath of discovery. "You know what I think," Pearl said one evening, shelling peas on the porch. "I think Catherine planned this. Not exactly, but spiritually. She knew whoever found the collection would be someone who understood loss. And she knew that person would need family as much as the collection needed protecting. She was matchmaking from beyond the grave." Gareth smiled. "You think she knew we'd find you too?" "I think she hoped," Pearl replied. "Hope was all Catherine had at the end. Hope that truth would surface, that good people still existed, that her sacrifice meant something. You three gave her hope substance. But not everyone in their life had such pure intentions. Dalton appeared without warning on a Saturday morning 6 months after the museum opened. Gareth opened the door to find his son standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking older than his 42 years. "Dad," Dalton said, "can we talk?" Gareth didn't move from the doorway. "About what?" "About everything. About what I did, what I should have done differently, about family." Miriam appeared behind Gareth. When she saw Dalton, her expression went carefully neutral. "You should have called first." "You wouldn't have answered," Dalton replied. "I've tried, Mum. I've called, emailed, sent letters. You won't talk to me." "That should tell you something," Gareth said. "It tells me you're angry, rightfully so. What I did was unforgivable. But I'm here to ask you to forgive me anyway. Not because I deserve it, but because I'm your son, and I'm asking." Lennox emerged from the car then, and behind her, the twins, now 8 years old. They hung back uncertainly, and Gareth felt something twist in his chest. His grandchildren, who barely remembered him. "You brought them as leverage," Miriam said quietly. "I brought them because they miss you," Dalton countered. "Because they ask about Grammy and Papa every week. Because they deserve to know their grandparents." "They had grandparents," Gareth said. "You took that away when you threw us out." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Miriam corrected. "You chose your convenience over your parents' welfare. You took our money, our home, our dignity, and when you were done with us, you discarded us like garbage." Dalton flinched. "I know. God, I know. I've replayed that night 1,000 times. If I could take it back—" "But you can't!" Gareth interrupted. "And now you're here because you saw us on television, saw that we found something valuable, and suddenly we're worth your time again." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Miriam's voice rose, something it rarely did. "You want to talk about fair? We gave you $160,000, our entire life savings. You lost it in 6 months on a business you never should have started. Did you apologize? Did you try to pay us back? No. You blamed us for being a burden, for existing in your space, for needing the help you promised." "The restaurant failed," Dalton said weakly. "We were drowning financially. So you used us as your life raft, and then cut us loose when we couldn't help you float anymore," Gareth said. "And now you're here because you think we have money again. You think we'll give you another chance to take everything." "I don't want your money," Dalton insisted. "Then what do you want?" Miriam asked. Dalton's composure cracked. Tears filled his eyes. "I want my parents. I want to look at myself in the mirror without hating what I see. I want my kids to know the people who raised me, the people who taught me about integrity and hard work and sacrifice before I forgot all those lessons." The porch fell silent. One of the twins, a girl, started crying softly. Lennox picked her up, whispering comfort. Pearl appeared in the doorway behind Gareth and Miriam. She took in the scene with a glance, then spoke softly. "Why don't you all come inside? This conversation shouldn't happen on a porch with neighbors watching." They sat around the kitchen table, awkward and tense. Pearl made coffee nobody drank. The twins sat close to their parents, frightened by the adult emotions crackling in the air. Gareth studied his son, really looked at him for the first time in months. Dalton had aged badly. Grey streaked his hair, lines carved deep around his mouth. He looked like a man carrying weight that was crushing him. "Why now?" Gareth finally asked. "Why 6 months later? You could have come the day after we found the collection. You could have shown up at the hotel. Why wait?" Dalton took a shaky breath. "Because Thomas Whitfield told me not to." That surprised everyone. "He called me," Dalton continued, "about 3 weeks after the news broke. Said he was your lawyer and friend, and that if I cared about you at all, I'd give you space to heal. He said you'd been traumatized, betrayed, and that bombarding you with apologies and requests for forgiveness would only make it worse. He said if I truly wanted a relationship again, I needed to prove I could respect boundaries, that I could put your needs before my own desires for redemption. Miriam glanced at Gareth. Neither of them had known Thomas did that. He said to wait 6 months, Dalton went on. Give you time to settle into your new life, to find peace, to decide what you wanted without pressure. So I waited. It's been exactly 6 months and 2 days. I counted every one. And what do you want? Miriam asked. Specifically, not vague statements about family. What are you asking for? Dalton looked down at his hands. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm not the man who hurt you. I'm asking for supervised visits, for phone calls when you're ready, for the opportunity to show my children who you really are. I'm not asking for money or support or anything except the smallest possibility that maybe, eventually, you might forgive me. And Lennox? Gareth asked, looking at his daughter-in-law. What are you asking for? Lennox met his gaze. I'm asking for nothing. What I did was worse than Dalton because I'm not your daughter. I had no history with you, no love to fall back on. I treated you like burdens because it was convenient, because I didn't want to deal with the complications of having you in our home. I was selfish and cruel, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But my children deserve to know their grandparents, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that possible, even if it means I'm never in the room when it happens. The honesty was startling. Gareth looked at Miriam, saw his own uncertainty reflected in her face. We need time, Miriam said finally. Time to think, to talk between ourselves, to figure out if we can do this without destroying the peace we've found. How much time? Dalton asked. As much as we need, Gareth said. You waited 6 months. You can wait longer if necessary. Dalton nodded slowly. Okay, that's fair. Can I leave you my number? The address where we're staying, in case you decide you're ready? We have your number, Miriam said. We've always had your number. They left soon after, the twins waving sadly from the car window. Gareth and Miriam stood on the porch watching them drive away, feeling hollowed out and uncertain. Did we just make a mistake? Miriam asked. Sending them away? I don't know, Gareth admitted, but I know we're not ready, and maybe that's okay. Maybe healing doesn't have a timeline. Pearl joined them on the porch, handed them both fresh coffee. Catherine told me once that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the hurt define you anymore. You don't have to forgive Dalton today or next month or ever, but you do have to decide if carrying this anger is worth the wait. Over the next weeks, Gareth and Miriam wrestled with the question. They talked late into the night, arguing and crying and trying to untangle feelings that seemed hopelessly knotted. They consulted Thomas, who listened without judgment and offered only questions, not answers. Do you want a relationship with Dalton? He'd ask. I don't know, Miriam would reply. I want the son I raised, not the man who abandoned us. Are they the same person? I don't know that either. What helped most was watching the people they helped through the Second Chance Trust. Families reuniting after hardship. Parents and children finding their way back to each other after devastating mistakes. Not every reunion worked. Some families were too broken, the damage too deep. But some found healing, and those stories gave Gareth and Miriam something to hold on to. 3 months after Dalton's visit, Miriam made a decision. She called Thomas and asked him to arrange a meeting. Neutral ground with conditions. Dalton and Lennox could come. The children could come. But Pearl and Thomas would be there too, as witnesses and support. They met at a park, picnic tables and playgrounds providing distraction for awkward silences. The twins ran to the swings immediately, and Gareth found himself following, pushing his granddaughter while she squealed with delight. "Hiya, Papa," she called, and the word hit him like a physical blow. Papa, she still remembered. Across the playground, Miriam sat with Dalton and Lennox, talking quietly. Gareth couldn't hear the words, but he could see Miriam's posture softening, her hands less clenched, her face less rigid. When the twins got tired, they came back to the tables. Lennox had brought sandwiches, and they ate in careful peace. Dalton told stories about the kids' school, about his new job as a manager at a hardware store, something stable and honest. Lennox talked about the therapy they'd been doing, individual and couples, working through the patterns that had led them to hurt the people they should have protected. "We're not asking to erase what happened," Dalton said as the afternoon wound down. "We're asking to build something new, not the family we were, but something different, something better." Miriam looked at Gareth. He saw the question in her eyes, saw 43 years of marriage that had taught them to communicate without words. He nodded slightly. "We can try," Miriam said carefully, slowly. "Supervised visits at first, phone calls when we're comfortable. But if you hurt us again, if you make us feel unwanted or burdensome or less than, we're done, completely. Do you understand?" Dalton and Lennox both nodded, tears streaming down their faces. "And you need to understand something else," Gareth added. "We're different now. We're not the parents who'll sacrifice everything for their children. We have our own lives, our own purpose, our own family in Pearl and Thomas and the people we help. You're not the center of our world anymore. You have to earn your place, and you might never get back what you lost." "I understand," Dalton said, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." The reconciliation was slow, painful, full of setbacks and breakthroughs. Some days Miriam refused Dalton's calls, too angry or hurt to speak. Other days she'd sit with the twins for hours, reading them stories and teaching them to bake the cookies she used to make for Dalton as a child. Gareth struggled more, the betrayal cutting deeper, harder to forgive. But watching Miriam find peace, watching his grandchildren slowly remember who he was, softened something in him. Pearl was their anchor through it all, reminding them that forgiveness was a process, not a destination, that some days they'd feel generous and other days they'd feel rage, and both were valid. Catherine struggled with forgiveness, Pearl told them one night. Her father made decisions that hurt the family. Her brothers abandoned her when she needed them. She carried that pain until she died. Don't be Catherine. Learn from her dedication and her sacrifice, but don't inherit her inability to let go. The other thing that helped was the work itself, the second chance trust, growing beyond anything they'd imagined. By the second anniversary of finding the collection, they'd helped over 400 people. The ripple effects were measurable, families staying together, people getting necessary medical care, children staying in school. One woman they'd helped, a single mother named Veronica who'd been facing eviction, came back a year later with her daughter. The daughter had graduated high school with honors, was heading to college on a scholarship. Veronica credited Gareth and Miriam with making it possible. "You didn't just save our apartment," Veronica said. "You saved my daughter's future. You showed her that when the world knocks you down, you get back up and help others get up too." Those moments sustained them, reminded them why they'd chosen this path. But the past wasn't done with them yet. Everett Pierce, released on bail pending trial, filed one final lawsuit. He claimed that Gareth and Miriam had conspired to defraud Millbrook Township, that they'd known about the collection before entering the manor, that the entire discovery was staged to steal what rightfully belonged to local government. It was absurd, easily disproven, but it required court appearances and testimony and reliving the worst night of their lives in front of strangers. Gareth took the stand first, telling the story of Dalton's betrayal, the broken-down car, stumbling through the rain. The defense attorney, hired by Pierce with money that should have been going to his legal defense, tried to paint Gareth as calculating, opportunistic. "Isn't it convenient," the attorney sneered, "that you just happened to break down near a manor that just happened to contain a billion-dollar collection?" "Convenient?" Gareth repeated. "We had $300 between us. Our son had thrown us out. We were sleeping in a car that barely ran. If that's your definition of convenient, You need a better dictionary." Miriam testified next, and she was devastating. Cool, composed, she walked through every detail of their discovery, produced copies of the photographs they'd taken, referenced Catherine's diary entries about hoping the collection would be found by someone seeking shelter. "My husband and I didn't find that collection," she said firmly. "It found us, or more accurately, Lady Catherine's faith that good people still existed led us to it. And despite losing everything, despite being betrayed and abandoned, we did what she asked. We protected it. We made sure it went where it belonged. If that's fraud, then I'll proudly plead guilty." The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to gavel for order. The case was dismissed within an hour of closing arguments. Pierce's attorney didn't even put up a real fight, apparently recognizing a losing battle. Pierce himself sat stone-faced in the gallery, then left without a word. 3 months later, he was convicted on 14 counts of fraud and conspiracy, sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. His family's grip on Millbrook Township was broken completely. Gareth and Miriam watched the sentencing on television from their cottage, Pearl beside them, Thomas on speakerphone. "It's over," Thomas said. "Really, truly over." But it wasn't over. It was transformed. What had started as a desperate flight from cruelty had become something larger, something that changed not just Gareth and Miriam's lives, but hundreds of others. The museum flourished, becoming a destination for art lovers worldwide. The Second Chance Trust expanded, partnering with other organizations, developing programs for elder care and financial literacy. Gareth and Miriam became reluctant celebrities, their faces recognizable, their story told and retold. But they remained unchanged at their core. They still lived in the small cottage, still had dinner with Pearl every night, still personally reviewed every application to the trust, still answered emails from people seeking help or advice, or just wanting to share their own stories of survival. One day, a young woman appeared at their door, maybe 25, with a backpack and nervous energy. Her name was Catherine, named after her grandmother, who'd heard Gareth and Miriam's story and found inspiration to leave an abusive relationship. "My grandmother said you proved that people can start over," Catherine explained. "That finding shelter, literal or metaphorical, is the first step to finding yourself. I just left everything. I have $300 and nowhere to go. I'm not asking for money. I just wanted you to know your story saved my grandmother, and now it's saving me." Miriam invited her in. They fed her, talked for hours, and by the time Catherine left, she had a room at a women's shelter the trust funded, a job interview lined up, and the names of therapists who specialized in abuse recovery. She became a regular visitor, then a volunteer at the trust, then eventually its program director. The girl with nothing became a force for good, helping others like her. "This is what Catherine Ashford meant," Pearl said one evening, watching young Catherine organize files in their home office. "Not just preserving art, but preserving people, giving them shelter until they're strong enough to weather the storm alone." On the 5-year anniversary of finding the collection, the museum hosted a gala. Gareth and Miriam attended reluctantly, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding its purpose. The event raised $3 million for the trust, for preservation efforts, for education programs. But the most meaningful moment came when the museum unveiled a new permanent exhibit. It wasn't about the art collection, it was about the human story behind it. Catherine Ashford's diary pages, carefully preserved. Pearl's photographs of the manor through the decades. Gareth and Miriam's first photographs of the collection, taken on Miriam's dying phone. Court documents from Pierce's trial, letters from people the trust had helped. The exhibit was called Sheltering Truth, and it told a story about more than art. It told a story about dignity, about integrity, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because it was right. Gareth and Miriam stood in front of a photograph of themselves from that first morning after discovery, looking exhausted and overwhelmed and determined. They barely recognized those people. "We've come far," Miriam said. "We have," Gareth agreed. "And we're not done yet." They weren't. There was still work to do, people to help, bridges to build with their family. Dalton and his family visited every Sunday now, relationships slowly healing. Their daughter Callista had reconnected too, bringing her children, making amends for years of distance. It would never be what it was, but it was becoming something different, something built on choice rather than obligation, on respect rather than assumption. Pearl's cancer scare had passed, leaving them grateful for every day they had together. Thomas, now 86, still practiced law, still helped people navigate the systems designed to crush them. Young Catherine was engaged to a kind man who worked at the museum, planning a wedding in the Manor's restored gardens. And Gareth and Miriam, now 73 and 72, still woke each morning in their cottage, still marveled at the path that had led them here. "Sometimes I think about that night," Gareth said one morning, watching sunrise paint the sky. "Standing on Dalton's sidewalk with everything we owned in 2 suitcases, I thought we were at the end." "We were," Miriam replied. "The end of one story, the beginning of another. Would you change it? If you could go back, knowing everything that came after, would you change that night?" Miriam considered carefully. "I'd change Dalton's choices. I'd change his heart so he never hurt us. But would I change our path after that moment? No, because every step, every struggle, every discovery led us here, led us to Purpose and Pearl and all the people we've helped. We lost our family and found 100 families. We lost our home and found our calling." Gareth pulled her close. "We found each other again too, really found each other. Not just 2 people going through motions, but 2 people choosing every day to stand together. Through storms and discoveries and everything between," Miriam agreed. "Anyone can rebuild their life if they have the courage to see worth where others see waste, to stand firm when they are pushed aside, and to believe that doing right matters more than getting even." Gareth and Miriam Caldwell didn't just discover a billion-dollar collection hidden beneath a forgotten manor. They discovered that sometimes being cast out is exactly when you're meant to find yourself. That shelter comes in unexpected forms, and that the most valuable treasures aren't made of paint and canvas, but of purpose, dignity, and the choice to protect beauty even when the world has forgotten your name. Because for Gareth and Miriam, and all those their story touched, the greatest discovery wasn't what they found in that vault. It was what they found in themselves. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories about ordinary people who discovered extraordinary legacies. Click to keep discovering with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes being forgotten by the world is exactly when you're meant to find yourself.